Hi, this is Lady C.
And this is JT. And welcome to another episode of The Critical Thought. Today we have a very unique guest. In fact, it is a father and daughter combination podcasters. These are people who will be sharing with us their experience and what they have come to see and understand about Jehovah's Witnesses and how it has touched their lives. And today we are glad to have them literally from over across the pond.
You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Welcome, Stephen and Celine.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, welcome, guys. Glad to have y'all heard this today.
Yes.
Thank you.
We thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to share all about your podcast, Father and Daughter.
Yeah.
And the name of it is What Should I Think About? And can we just kind of start off a little bit talking about what this podcast is all about?
So, we wanted to do something. And this idea of what should I think about ... was the idea of the podcast. And it's really... especially when you come out of a high control group or a cult, you've had everything given to you in terms of what you believe and what you should think about this and what you should think about that. And everything, as a lot of your viewers will know, is determined for you by the group. So when you leave, you've got all these questions. What should I think about this now? What do I think about evolution? What do I think about God? What do I think about ethics and morals and so on and so on? So it's like the whole world of questions suddenly you have in front of you. So we thought that'd be really interesting to explore that from a kind of father-daughter perspective, and with that added element of being being an ex-witness.
Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do in this episode of The Critical Thought is we're going to talk a little bit about your personal life and your family and how, what your life was like, as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, how you woke up and, what happened with your children after you left the religion. So, Stephen, you want to tell us a little bit about your experience growing up?
Sure.
or how you became one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I was born in third generation, and big extended family, uncles, aunties, cousins, all pretty much for the most part, all witnesses, vast majority were. So I was just steeped in it, really. Grew up in it. I always had little issues, I suppose, and I did have doubts growing up, but I really wanted to believe it because it was my culture. It was everything I knew, and the thought of leaving was terrifying, really, because I knew it would possibly mean losing everybody. So, I also wanted to please. I was a very kind of I wanted to be a good witness, I wanted to be a pioneer, and when I grew up, and then I wanted to be maybe a circuit overseer one day, a missionary maybe. So I had lots of kind of ambitions in that area, and I was quite a horribly precocious JW kid. Those children that do a lot of answering and on the platform, they do a lot of all the stuff. They're all perfect little kid. I was that, that kid, unfortunately. So I was kind of good at being a witness, and as a man, you have opportunities to kind of progress, I suppose. So got made a ministerial servant, was a regular pioneer, worked on the regional building, Kingdom Hall projects and all of that. So I was very steeped in, but I always had doubts, and eventually those doubts just kind of shouted louder and louder. And then, of course, Celine came along, which I got married to another Jehovah's Witness, my wife Sarah, and so we had Celine. And at that point, I really felt that all these doubts that I'd had for many, many years, I needed to deal with them because it was bothering me, and I felt like I either had to really be completely confident it was the truth, so I could tell Celine that, or I had to do something different, because I couldn't tell Celine that all this stuff was true if I didn't really believe it. So it was really Celine that was the catalyst. So that's another good reason why we wanted to do something together, because in a way, she was the reason that I had to make that choice.
Yeah, that's a good point. Did you find yourself getting baptized at a young age?
So in my day, as they say, I was 16, and that was kind of the norm, really. 16, 17 was sort of normal. You might see the odd 15-year-old, and every now and again to the assembly, you'd see somebody who was 12 or something, and everybody would whisper, that's very young, isn't it? So the culture, certainly in the UK at that time, was not to get baptized early. I mean, still 16 is still a minor, really. So
Yeah.
it is, of course, still too young, but it wasn't, like we're seeing 8-year-olds and so on these days. So, yeah, I felt I was ready. Although, again, I've told this story on our podcast. I remember sitting, waiting for the coach to take me to the assembly. For some reason, the rest of my family had gone in by car, and I was the only one going on the coach. So I was in the room on my own, and I remember sitting there on the settee, just begging Jehovah to give me the faith so I really believed it 100%. Because even on the day of my baptism, I'd had these doubts, and I'd had them all through, really. But I really wanted to believe. So I kept saying, please, Jehovah, make me believe it. Make me believe it. I really want to believe it. And so, yeah, I got baptized. And of course, you're a celebrity for a day, aren't you? And then it just meant that I could do, other things. I could look to be a ministerial servant and stuff. So for me, it didn't make a great deal of difference, other than, of course, it locks you in, which is something that you don't think about at the time, really.
Yeah, that's true. You do get locked in. That's for sure. Yeah.
So it was. So I don't think my story is very different to many other people. I think most people have a similar story who are born-ins, and it just it was just my culture. It was my upbringing. It was everything I knew, really. So leaving was a very difficult thing. Although when I did leave, I was working, had a business with my dad at the time. So in a way, nothing much changed, really, because I just carried on working with him and, didn't really do anything different. So it didn't feel like much had changed at first. Gradually, things did change.
Because obviously you don't start immediately doing everything differently post leaving. It's not like immediately you were doing like a massive Christmas and birthdays and, all of these things that you'd not done before. Like you slowly integrate those things, like that you remember going to vote for the first time, or like when we for my birthday, we went to Disney Paris, I remember, when I was 4 or something, or 5. And that was the first time we'd like celebrated it. But obviously I don't remember past that, before that anyway. But that was like a big deal, wasn't it? But it was all a big deal and it was different. It wasn't immediate.
That's right. Yeah, I guess some people do. They leave and then they kind of go berserk. They go, oh, hey, party time. I didn't. Maybe I was 30. Maybe it was because I was a bit older. I didn't leave when I was a teenager. Maybe when you do that, then maybe you just kind of go mad for a while. But I didn't. Not at first. I kind of then it took a few years and then started to experiment with life, if you like. So did go through that phase a little bit. But no, it was at first. I don't think we even knew how to celebrate birthdays. How do you do Christmas? It's like we had to learn it, which sounds bizarre, but.
What about your because you mentioned that you had a lot of family that were Jehovah's Witnesses and you're married and things like that. So one question I like to ask is, how about your wife? What was it like for her when she found out about how you felt about this religion?
Yeah, so obviously I talked to Sarah about it, and she, I honestly can't remember exactly what she said. I can't remember that conversation at all, actually. So it's something that
just erases memories. He just avoids things. He's just like, put that away.
Maybe I do it on purpose. Yeah, but I don't remember it. I don't think she wasn't too upset about it. She carried on going to the meetings, and I took her and picked her up. So I was one of those husbands that sometimes you see at the outside the Kingdom Hall waiting in the car.
Me and Mum went together, didn't we, for a bit?
That's right. Yeah.
So we sat at the back
I'd have conversations with witnesses. They'd come out and say, "Hello, Stephen, how are you?" Because I didn't get disfellowshipped. I didn't disassociate. I just faded. And at that point, I kind of just didn't really say much. I just said, "Look, I need some time." Came off from being anything, Ministerial Servant and stuff, and just said, I need a bit of time to think things through and find out what I believe. And when people asked me, what's the matter, Stephen? What's wrong? I didn't really answer them because I knew, I knew that's dangerous territory if you start answering people.
Yeah, it is.
It is, but something. So, like, are you being shunned right now?
No, not really. No, we still have a relationship with my mum and dad, which is great. And I'm still sort of officially just, I guess I'm still inactive officially. But it's been 25 years, so
Yeah, there's like the thing where we don't talk to everybody, but it's not like we got some people receive letters and things saying like, that's it, we're not talking to you anymore. But it wasn't official. Some people just don't talk to us anymore.
No, and there's I guess we call it soft shunning, don't we, in the parlance? So I think there's a bit of that going on. Although I'm speculating, but I think that is happening. But no, I don't. I never did get disfellowshipped. The way I feel about it, and I respect how anybody wants to handle this. It's entirely up to them. But the way I felt about it was that I don't owe Jehovah's Witnesses anything in terms of an explanation. So I don't need to write them a letter to tell them that I'm no longer a witness. I know I'm no longer a witness. I haven't been for 25 years. Everybody that knows me, I'm quite happy now to tell them what I think and why I think it. So there's no doubt that I'm not a Jehovah's Witness anymore. But I decided I didn't need to write a letter and then for it to be formalized and me to be shunned. So that's kind of where I am. I mean, it is one of the things that I suppose has worried me a little bit since I've only become kind of active and visual. I can't think of the right word, but I've only been doing this sort of thing for the last year, really. So I've just kept a low profile. So I suppose there is a slight concern that somebody will see something or hear one of our podcasts and think, oh, we need to follow that up, so that could happen, but I've made peace with that now, and I feel like I have to have my say. Basically, I want to talk about it.
Well, you say you've been gone for 25 years. So during that time, what was your life like? What's the first thing you did after you left this religion?
Wow, what a great question. What was the first thing I did? I remember the day that I kind of mentally became at peace with the fact that I was no longer a Jehovah's Witness. That was the moment when I'd been, before that, clinging on, trying to find a way for me to come back and accept it all. But there was one particular day, it was a kind of day, I think it was around this time of year, sort of autumn time or the fall. And there was a beautiful autumn blue sky, very clear sky. And I looked up at the sky, and it was actually around the time, I think it was, I could be getting my memories mixed up, but it was around the time when the Hale-Bopp comet was around, and you could actually see it sometimes on a really clear day, even during the day. And I remember looking up, and just it felt like a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was like the sky was even bluer, the trees were even greener, and it was just absolutely that feeling of absolute relief that I no longer had to pretend to believe something, and this thing that had bothered me for so many years had gone. What did I then sort of go ahead and do? I don't think I did very much. I didn't, as I said, I didn't do anything. Eventually, I decided that career was going to be my focus, obviously outside of my family. And so I did a course on computing. So I kind of went back to school, did that for a couple of years, and then left the job that I had with my dad, and then got into the kind of corporate training world, which is where I still am. So I think it was around career. The first thing I did was think about my career, but it took me a few years really to get into that.
Awesome. So you went to IT. So are you still in IT?
Not really. No, I did that. We call them A-levels, which is what you normally do when you're 16, 17, you do A-levels, advanced levels after your normal school, if you like. And then that allows you to go on to university if you get the right A-level. So that's basically what I did there. But I was in my 30s, so I'm going back to school during that. And I did computing. I then got a job teaching people how to use computers. So that kind of helped me get into the teaching or training arena. And then I got a job as a sort of technical analyst, a help desk analyst, basically, doing a bit of that and doing a bit of training. But it was during that time that I realized I really didn't like IT. And I didn't like a lot of the people in it. So it really wasn't my thing. But the thing that I was good at was the training bit. So and then I fell into a role that was like training people in management skills and soft skills like communication skills, and then got into lean manufacturing and all of that sort of stuff. So that's what I do these days. I've not done IT training for many years. So yeah, I haven't got the interest, I think, in that sort of that very techie side that I think you need if you're going to be in IT.
But I like what you're saying, though, Stephen, because, what it shows is that after you left the organization, even though you were older and you realized that you had to get in the game some kind of way, right?
Yeah.
So you get into this IT job, you realize, hey, this is not for me. But then you took those other skills and turned it into something else, which is what I try to encourage people to do all the time, is to do stuff just like that. How about your friends, the kind of friends that you began to acquire after leaving the religion?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest bits, isn't it? Obviously, at this time, my wife stayed as a witness only for about a year or so. She'd had her own exiting process, and she wanted to make sure that people didn't think that just because I'd left, she'd left. So she wanted to make her own mind up about it, and that's what she did. So that helped because obviously we left together, which is a lot easier. So I've still got my best friend, which is my wife. So that was great. But in terms of other friends, I found that actually really quite difficult, and it's something I reflect on quite a bit. It's something that we've talked briefly about on the podcast. I think we probably need to talk a bit more about it. I found that very, very difficult, and I think looking back on it now, I probably came across a bit desperate, really, to make friends. So I kind of went out a lot, to events and tried to get to know people. And I think I just sort of became a bit desperate to try and build up another bank of friends. And also, as a witness, you think that you've got a worldwide brotherhood of friends, and actually, in reality, you don't really have that, but you think you have that. So when I left, I thought that I needed to replace all of that. So that's a huge task, isn't it? To replace a worldwide brotherhood. You're never going to be able to do that. So I think I kind of probably worried more than I needed to. I ended up with a couple of really close friends and still friends with them today. And actually that was enough. That's all I needed. I think I was quite anxious about that, about having lots of friends. So that takes a bit of time to get used to. It's one of the things that happens during transition, I believe, is that you have to come to terms with who you are and how you interact with other people.
I think it's hard anyway, because when you look at men, just typically don't make as many friends when they're adults. So there's statistically, when you look at the stats and stuff, the men suffer from loneliness more as well anyway. So post school, that's just something that we see in the statistics. So it's then even more difficult when you get launched from your your community network to then make friends when it's already, for societal reasons and all of that, more difficult for men anyway. So I imagine that played a role, because Mum obviously made friends with people taking me to school and things.
Yeah.
So Mum's friends are a lot of my school friends' parents, because that just was a network that she was able to get into. But yeah, so that's something that we can probably is worth talking about more on the podcast as well at some point, with different people's opinions on that. But I imagine that plays into it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest challenges that in talking to people that they face when they leave the organization is creating a clientele of friends. My mom always said you got to start building a new clientele of friends, which is true. And it's very difficult because for most of us, we are leaving as adults. Yeah. And most people's friends are created in their formative years, and they become lifetime friends. And so as adults, it's more of a challenge, and it can throw a former Jehovah's Witness off. We look at our comments, we look at the emails we get, the phone calls that we make, and that's one of the things. I mean, I don't got nobody to talk to. I don't have nobody to hang out with. Yeah. And so, the point that you made is an excellent point, and it's a cautionary point too, that because we don't have any quote unquote friends, if we're not careful, we will find ourselves literally attracted to anyone who says hello. And we think that they're going to be a friend of ours. And so you have to be very, very careful. Both men and women have to be very, very careful of that. One of the questions I would like to pose, because when you left, and it ranges from one extreme to the other. In your congregation, what did the shepherds do when they noticed that you weren't being regular at the meeting or coming to the meeting? Did they really take the time? Hey, look, we want to stop by and talk to you. What was your personal experience? Because it does vary.
Yeah, it does.
Ones from the elders are on your doorstep every day. Yeah. So, man, nobody never even called me when I left. They just left me out there. So what was your personal experience like?
That's a really good point. That's something we found in our interviews, that, some poor souls, they feel like they were kind of, nobody kind of cared. But I did get a couple of visits. I got one that I can remember from a couple of elders, and they were very nice. And they, they listened to my thoughts, and I tried to explain how I felt, but I was kind of playing quite a cautious game. I was very aware that saying the wrong thing could get me disfellowshipped, and I was very clear I didn't want to get disfellowshipped. So that for me was a goal, and so I thought, well, how do I do this without getting disfellowshipped? And so when the elders came round, I wasn't dogmatic about anything. I didn't say, well, I've done my research and it's clear that this isn't the truth. By this time, I think I'd already decided that. I think I'd already realized that, I believed that evolution was the way that the animals have developed the way they have, including human beings, and, all of those things. And a lot of the arguments about Bible prophecy didn't make sense to me anymore. They kind of I struggled with that. And I finally accepted that they didn't, these reasons to believe the Bible just didn't cut it as far as I was concerned. But I didn't say any of that. I just said to them, these areas I'm struggling with, I really want to understand them, and I'm doing my own research, and I'm taking some time out to do that. So I kind of just, I just patted them away a little bit and say, don't worry too much. It's not that I'm definitely going, I may be back, but I'm just trying to understand what I think. And that was, fairly, I suppose, cynical way of trying to avoid getting disfellowshipped. And you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to. If you want to leave a religion, you should be able to say to anybody that asks you, the reason I'm leaving is because I don't believe this, or I don't believe that, or I just don't want to be part of it anymore. I believe something else. You should be allowed to do that. And it's one of the things that, if Jehovah's Witnesses want to be accepted like other religions in society, then they have to change that. You have to allow people to leave with dignity, and you have to allow them to leave without consequences, like not being able to talk to your family and all of that. And until they do that, I think that they're going to have to put up with activism and so on, because that's that's just not acceptable as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you make an excellent point, and that's what we try to stress to people. Everything you describe is that you should be able to do this, you should be able to do that, and this and that, and this and that. All that's true. And really, I tell people, this is really your confirmation that you are in a cult.
That's right.
Because you can't do those things. And so if you ever wanted, we watch about cults on TV, we see them in, on TV shows and this and that. Child, we were part of a cult. And this is what it looks like. You cannot do those things. And the approach that you took was very similar to the approach that we took. We faded like that. And for me, when I left, my wife and I, we talked about it. We knew we weren't going to explain nothing to these guys because once you realize this is not the truth, that elder stuff, it means absolutely nothing. So I'm not obligated to explain to you anything how I feel.
Exactly.
And so once you reach that point, then you're not going to sit there. Well, let me, this old magazine. I didn't do any of that stuff. I'm like, I don't waste my time with these guys because I know who they are. And all the elders, when the elders come to your house, all they want to know is one simple question. Do you believe that this is the truth? And regardless of whatever explanation you come up with, it doesn't matter. Now, for some people, if they want to go through the whole process, that's fine. But a lot of people I know who go through that whole process, they end up getting disappointed because they're like, well, I had all this information, JT, all this proof. It doesn't mean a thing.
Right.
And this is and the approach that you took when you just walked out, because we just sail around out the door and we never look back. I have not stepped foot in the Kingdom Hall since we left.
Right. And I think we probably left around the same. You may have left a couple years earlier than we did. And I think during that time, IT was a big hot thing at the time. And I think like people who weren't really, had an education and things, that was probably one of the easiest fields to go into.
No, it's a good point. It was, it was the future, wasn't it? IT was the future. Everybody was going to be in IT. So, it seemed like, and plus I was kind of interested. It was quite exciting, all this technology stuff, But unlike people like Celine, who's grown up around it, I'd not touched a computer until I was in my 30s, I think people find that hard to imagine a world where you'd never touched a computer. I remember operating a mouse for the first time and it going all over the place. I just didn't know anything about computing. But within a couple of years, I was training people how to use them. So it just shows you how you can learn new things. And so that was a good opportunity for me.
Yeah. And what about your education? How did you take care of that?
So I left school at 16, which was the legal, you had to have education up to 16 in those days. I think it's 18 now in the UK. And that was it. I did get a full-time job for a couple of years, for 3 years. But I knew I should be pioneering. That was a guilty thing that I had on my conscience, that I should be pioneering. So I left that and I got a window cleaning round. And that was it. So I had no real education other than high school education. So then, as I said, when I left, I did this A-level in computing, scraped through. Wasn't really my bag because it went into a lot of the sort of, the technical side of it. But I did get that. And then, but where I really started what I would call my proper education was, I waited until I was in my 40s, actually, to do my degree. So I was 44 when I started it. It took me 6 years to do a psychology degree with the Open University in the UK. I think it's well known around the world. It's like it mainly caters for adult learners, for mature students. So I did that. And then straight after that, I did my master's in organizational psychology. And that took me a couple of years. So my education has been really in psychology and obviously related subjects to that. And that helped me for my job as well. So, but during my master's, I started to realize that I still had a real interest in this whole area of cults and high control groups, because my master's is in organizational psychology, which actually started to dig into things like how organizations influence people, and how they recruit people, and how people might have a calling into certain jobs, if you like, and how people feel about that. And actually, it started to all sorts of bells started ringing in my head, which was, actually, I was in a very particular type of organization, and cults are organizations. This is an area that hasn't really been studied very much. So we talk about cults a lot, and we talk about the effect it has on individuals, but thinking about cults as organizations and the way they do things as organizations is kind of a field that is a bit open. So that's kind of where I'm thinking now is maybe I can contribute to that field in some way. I'm not quite sure how I do that, but that's something that I think might be an area to get into. So yeah, that's really what I did education wise. Obviously, it comes at a cost. I was quite lucky at the time. There were grants to do further education. It's not quite so generous now. So if you're leaving now, it's harder to get a degree. But for me, it was good. Yeah.
Wow, that's so awesome.
Wow, yeah.
So it's really nice to hear that you went into school at a later age, because a lot of people are like, when I tell you how we receive emails from people that are 21 years old, and they say, my life is over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do. And I'm thinking, I went to school when I was in my 30s too,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't realize just how good they have it. They don't understand that.
Yeah.
But I guess everybody's different,
Yeah, well, we're trying again. This is the thing. We're trying to frame a lot of things. We're trying to reframe a lot of things when you leave. So well, and I think you do have a sense of being behind. I don't know whether you guys felt this, but I know that I felt like I was always playing catch up, and it affected my choices at work, and it also affected my behavior at work. I've talked about this on the podcast because I think there's things that I behaved in quite a bad way at times, and I'm happy to admit it. Happy is perhaps not the right word, but willing to admit it, that I was a pretty hard work, I think, for my managers at work, because I felt so behind. I'd look around and everybody was younger than me, so I didn't have time to hang around. And if I wasn't getting the progression that I thought I should be getting, I was quite difficult, a difficult person to manage. I don't think I'm like that anymore, and I'm not kind of proud of it. But I think it was. Without wanting to make excuses for my bad behaviour, I think it was because I felt like I was really trying to catch up, and I felt under that strain and stress of trying to get to a place where everybody else had already got to. So I wasn't violent or anything, but I was just quite difficult, I think, and I've just really, really focused on making progression, and that was an area of intense frustration to me as I was growing up and as I was as developing my career. And what I found, and you might identify with this, and some of your viewers and listeners might identify with it too. But what I found was when I'd had difficulties with my career, like everybody does in jobs, I would straight away blame my upbringing for that, and that I would blame my parents and I would blame the organisation for making me, start late, and it was all because of that. And so that really didn't do me any favours. I think it made me quite angry, and took me a while to work through that, I think, because of course some of it was because of that, but sometimes life is just difficult. You do get made redundant sometimes. you do get rubbishy jobs, and you have to leave them, and you make mistakes, and you have to sort them out. So that is something I had to come to terms with, I think.
I totally agree with everything you said in terms of trying to play catch up. Yeah. I feel like when I was getting into the workforce, it was almost like because I didn't have that degree, I couldn't get those management jobs. And I ended up reporting to people that are younger than me. So I totally understand what you're saying.
If you look,
it's a very common thought that comes up for all former Jehovah's Witnesses. And I guess we just have to be, we just have to also be realistic. We are behind. We're behind in terms of finances. Many of us have not saved the amount of money that we wanted to have saved. We may not be in a career. We may not. There's so many things that we are actually behind. And I think that is part of coming to terms with being part of a high control group. But the good thing is, and this is why I often have this conversation with my wife, we have to be careful, because if we constantly just look at people who are in front of us, it can become overwhelming. It can become very, very frustrating. We can use it as a motivator, but if we're not careful, it can make us depressed. And that's why sometimes we have to literally just take a look at all the people who are behind us. Anybody who left this organization 3, 4, 5 years ago, they're 5 years ahead of all the people that we grew up with. We just had a conversation. My wife and I just had a conversation because she was talking to someone that we know. We were very close with them. And after being out of the organization for many years, this couple, they are still trying to get into the circuit work. And what that means is they have had to work jobs. So if they get a minute's notice, because you get like 30 days to liquidate all your assets, they have been holding back from getting a lot of material things just in case they get that letter from the society that says, we're going to put you into the traveling work. And so they done burned 25, 30 years waiting to get a job in the circuit work that's not coming. It's not coming. And so you look back and you realize, man, that could have been us. That could have been us.
I know.
And so there's a balanced approach. We use it we use it as an encouragement, but we don't want to use it as a discouragement. And by looking behind us many times, wherever we are in our life, the fact that we left, I mean, I don't care if you're not doing nothing. The fact that you left, you can now get up on a Saturday morning and know that you don't have to hawk no books. And so, and I tell this especially to older people who they may be in their 70s. We have a gentleman right now. He's like in his 70s, going on 80. He's left.
Wow.
But he doesn't have to get up in the cold and the snow and go out there and hawk them books no more. He can take time, get up in the morning, have a little cup of coffee, his little biscuit, and call it a day. And so each individual has to look at his or her life or his family, and you're going to have to take that, like we often say, look at those lemons we got and turn them into lemonade some way. We have to do that.
Well, what about you, Celine? I'm kind of curious as to what your life was like growing up, because your dad is saying that his parents are still, practicing Jehovah's Witnesses. So your parents are gone, but your grandparents are still in. What was your life like growing up?
Yeah, so obviously all of my family, except for mum and dad, but most are still witnesses and were witnesses, especially when I was younger. So grandparents on both sides were witnesses, but had more to do with dad's side just because geography, like we were closer by, and they would help like babysit when I was little and things like that. I remember certain family members would definitely originally try and witness to me, or like say little things, or like you're just aware of things that you don't have, that other children I suppose don't have to be in. That I was like, oh, I bought some birthstone earrings for myself on holiday, but I was like, oh, I won't tell grandma that they're my birthstone, because then or I won't tell these people that they're birthstone ones, because they'll all just go quiet and weird, and I don't really understand why, because I'm a child, but I don't really want that either. So there was definitely like dad, in that I wanted to make sure everyone was happy and it was all good, and I would be like, so I'd just be normal as at home, and then when with the witness family, try and be ultra perfect example, even though just to be like, look, even though we're not witnesses, we're good, aren't we good? I suppose.
Wow. Yeah. That is so powerful, because that's one of the challenges that even people who leave the organization try to do. We try to let our family and people we've known know we're still good. No, we're still good people. And they don't really care. They don't care. They want to know, are you going to do the program? And so I can't imagine what it must be like for a kid. You literally having to live in two worlds somewhat. Did you ever find, and I think we had mentioned, we spoke briefly, and I thought it would be good to share with the audience, what it must have been like, because witnesses are taught if their children leave, then try to get the grandchildren, the grandkids. So what was it like with your grandparents? Because, they still could count time, and placements.
They if I asked, they would be very like quick to engage, because I suppose like as a child you're curious and you know that your family do certain things, and like some, I would go to meetings with them if they were taking care of me. And that, to me, if anything, them taking me to meetings, maybe they thought that was good because they were like, oh, she'll see and she'll learn, it'll be good. And I just was bored. I was so bored. I'd just be drawing in this little notebook and looking back at the clock behind me, even though, you kind of get looked at for constantly looking at the clock. But to me, it just made me think as a child, oh no, I don't want to be here. Because you're a kid and it's boring and it's a Saturday. So because there was times when I thought I wanted to go because my family was there as well, and they all, when they take you, obviously all of their friends would be like, hello, like make a big thing of you being there, and family my age would be going, so I'd be like, oh, I'll see them. But yeah, it was just so boring, and the more you learn about it and it becomes clear that it's not a happy, good place, that it's all performative, you don't want to go. But yeah, I had relatives would tell me things that I was like, why don't you guys do Christmas? Why can't we all do Christmas? And this relative was like, oh, well, if there was a chocolate in the drain, would you eat it? Like in the, like the drainage in the street, like comparing Christmas to like dirty chocolate and things like that. So there'd be these weird stories told. But I know that Dad very clearly made it very clear to not witness to me, and that if people witnessed to me, they wouldn't be seeing me, because he wasn't going to have that. And I'm glad that he said that, because children don't need that in their lives. It's confusing. But yeah, that went on, but not forever. That was quickly stopped.
Wow. Yeah. They even love bomb the kids.
Yeah, they do.
Oh yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. They come up and be like, you sing so lovely, because I'd sing the hymns, and they'd be like, oh, your singing voice is beautiful, and things like this. They'd be like, oh, I heard you from all the way over there across the meeting hall.
Yeah. I mean, the kids can oftentimes be used. People often ask the question, should you allow your children to go to the meetings with their relatives? And of course, it's a personal decision for anybody that can let their kids go. But we've had some very interesting stories over the years, and some of them are not good. They go to the meetings, right? And they listen. Children listen, and they, many times there have been cases where the child says, I want to do this. And all of a sudden, this parent who has left the organization, their child turns 16, 17 years old, gets baptized, and now they have actually shunning their mom and dad. And so we've talked to people. They're like, we just let them go to the meetings a few times with the relatives, and next thing we know, they now baptized, and they're like, Mom and Dad, I can't talk to you because you left God. Exactly. And so it's and the point that your dad was making about understanding how these cults are organized, how they work, it is very, very powerful. It is absolutely powerful.
Well, Celine, when did you get to know all about the witnesses and their teachings? Do you know everything about what was going on with this woman?
I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't remember, it's not like I ever had to sit down and have the JW talk where it was like, so what is going on here? It just was something that I suppose you just slowly work out more. So I knew that we didn't invite our JW relatives around when we had the Christmas tree up, or when we had if we were having birthday parties, we wouldn't be inviting them. So that was the things that JW children know anyway. I knew like by proxy, I suppose, because I was like, well, they won't be involved in that. It just wasn't as upsetting for me, obviously, because I was still doing it. I was having birthday parties. They just weren't involved. But, you know, kids would ask like, oh, why don't you have like your family barbecues? Why is it only your mum and dad? And so you work it out. I think, you know, you just ask questions because people act weirdly. Like I said, I'd have something that was like a birthstone or, you know, something that was, I don't know, it must be pagan again. I don't know. But, you know, you'd work out that people would act weird when you brought things like that up. So you'd ask, and then mum and dad were happy to explain and say, oh, it's because they believe this. So yeah, I guess people would be weird and I would ask why.
So it sounds like you were like bumping your head up against the wall and then you're getting a learning moment and things like that. But did anybody ever give you the Armageddon talk?
Well, I did have I had my book of Bible stories, which had all of that. Because I can still, when I think of that book, I think of the woman turned to like, she turned to salt or whatever. I see her. Yeah. And I was like,
nightmares.
Yeah. And like but I remember I took that book because I was like, oh, it'll make my relatives really happy if I take this with me to school. So I took it with me to school and I was like showing these kids my book of Bible stories. Like, oh yeah, let's look at this one. It's like awful. All the pictures are like people screaming. There's like fire and brimstone and, you know, there's like I remember like looking at a picture and thinking, oh, these ladies look really pretty. And it was actually like an awful story about like some women that, you know, are going to get like, that were in trouble for being, like with her feminine wiles or whatever. But I just remember like thinking, oh, this is a nice picture compared to all the other ones. These like nice smiling women. But yeah, obviously not when you read the context. But yeah, I remember, I think they tried to be a bit more soft in the way they talked about it. I guess if the relatives did, or like I would look at the pamphlets they had with the animals and things. It was maybe less fire and brimstone and more, look, you can stroke animals and tigers, because I loved animals as a kid. So they're like, this is a good way to talk about it, maybe. But there wasn't too much fire and brimstone talk. Yeah. You
know, when listening to you talk, I feel like that was really confusing, because when I was growing up as a kid, you know, we had that one path. So my dad wasn't a witness. He went along with the okie doke and eventually got baptized himself. But, you know, I had that one path of this is the truth. This is where you got to be. But you're with your parents and they're saying you can do this. Then you're over here with these Jehovah's Witnesses. And thinking about that Bible story book, that had to be really devastating.
It's a horrible book. Yeah.
Oh my God.
We had the Paradise Lost, the Paradise Regained book. Worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I had nightmare. My mom used to scare us to death. You see, that's gonna be y'all right there. Y'all keep acting up.
Yeah. With the woman when she was stepping on the snake. That's what I remember the Paradise Lost book. But I feel like when the Bible story book came along, I feel like, you know, I was already old enough to handle that. But now listening to you talk, it's almost like to a 5-year-old. That could be devastating.
Yeah, I was very young. So like I said, I think very quickly realized it was. I think as like a small child, when you just don't understand things, you just think like, oh, it's just like a nice club. It's like community and friends and family are there. But then you start to realize quite quickly it's not like that, I suppose. When I was old enough to stay home alone, if I was staying at grandma and granddad, so, you know, for a weekend, I would just stay for a few hours while they went to the meeting and then they'd come back. So I think it didn't really. The confusion, I suppose, didn't last long. It very quickly. I guess I'm very I'm very close with my parents, so seeing how people treated them and hearing, I guess, you know, as you get older, you start to hear the stories and you connect the dots. When you know, I stopped seeing certain people because they didn't want to talk to us anymore, as I guess we were out for longer. And I don't know, just the more you realize. The more I realized how my parents had been treated, the more I was like, I don't like this religion. This is bad. and didn't want anything to do with it personally.
Yeah, that's very true. In terms of Lady C and I, we were just discussing how there's a group of people now, and you're a part of that group, where you actually get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, the pros and the cons. And when people can see the pros and the cons, they can make better choices about whether they want to be a part of it. One of the questions that we used to often ask people is, if you had known what you know now, do you think your mom, dad, or even yourself would have become one of Jehovah's Witnesses? And almost, to the man, to the woman, they're like, no. If I'd known, this was on the other side of that little curtain. And so people like yourself, you, by growing up in the family that you were part of, your parents were not part of it, your grandparents were, and as you said, you could literally see the difference. And that is very important. And that's what actually frightens this organization more than anything else. That's why it's so important that they lock down the ability to talk to people, because when you tell people what the other side looks like, people are like, oh no, I'm thinking about this for a few minutes. And that's what people like yourself, this new generation, where you can actually get access to information that wasn't available years ago. You guys are going to be able to make some very good decisions because you have information to work with.
Right.
Definitely.
Now, Stephen, we had talked offline about your current beliefs. So, Stephen, how did you raise your daughter? Being raised as a Jehovah's Witness, what kind of a belief system did you eventually take up with?
Yeah, it's funny, as Celine was talking there, it sort of made me realize that when I left, for quite a long time, I didn't see that. In fact, if somebody had asked me as soon as I left whether I thought Jehovah's Witnesses were a cult, I would probably have said no. Because I didn't have that level of fear towards the organization. I think that's why we were happy for Celine to go to meetings with her grandparents. And if somebody had said, Celine might end up becoming a witness, I would have probably thought, oh, that's all right. So I didn't have the same level of kind of dislike towards the organization that I do now. My attitude has hardened a lot over the years as I've thought about the consequences of being a Jehovah's Witness. So that's just something that occurred to me as I was listening. In terms of my beliefs now and how we raise Celine, I think we. I'm a humanist, although that I've only sort of identified myself as that over the last 5 years or so. I think raising Celine, it was about just telling her the truth, and part of that truth is that there's things we don't know. So, you guys with your critical thinking, for me, that is the secret, and that's what we wanted to teach Celine, was how to think critically, which means looking at the evidence, weighing it up, coming to a conclusion if you can, or there may be times when you literally have to say, do you know what, I'm still not sure about this. And, I feel that that's really important to be able to say, yeah, there's some things we simply don't know the answer to, and but the great thing is we can try and find out. We don't have to go to the Watchtower to find out. We can actually find out for ourselves. So I think that's the way we raised it, was to question, to critically think about things, look for evidence. Absolutely.
Every time I said anything that wasn't like that, I just said something like flippantly or not, he'd just be like, where's the research for that? Where's the evidence? And I just like, it used to be like the bane of my existence, because I'd just say something. I'd be like, oh, this is something that I've heard, and just think that I'd just like go on my way, and I'd be like, well, where's the research for that? I'm not going to take that at face value, Celine. You've got to like find some evidence and proof of that. Like it's like funny, but it was good really, because it means, yeah, you look for evidence in what you're saying. You don't just say things and hear it and go with it and just that's it.
We did a little thing that Celine reminded us of recently, is that so we tried to get Celine to get used to kind of earning money, So we did a bit of pocket money, but I remember having a conversation with her, trying to say to her, look, if you do certain jobs, we'll give you money for that, so you can actually earn much more pocket money if you do some of these jobs. But that was very, very difficult. Celine was not motivated by financial reward. But what she would do is, I'd say to her, right, I'm going to give you a question this week to go and find the answer to, or to do some research about. Then, I'll give you, I think I gave her some money for that. So that's how she earned a bit more pocket money, was I'd give her a question. She had to find the answer to that.
Just not on the internet, though.
Was it? I had to find books or something. Yeah,
books, or find out from teachers, or go and find it from other sources somehow. And then it was you can have £1 for this knowledge.
Yeah. So trying to train her to do her own research.
It was good fun. Yeah. So as much as before I was talking about, there might have been some confusing times with weird relatives. I had a really good childhood. I was raised in a way that I'm really happy with, and I'm really grateful that I was raised in the way I was and not as a witness. So just make sure that was clear as well.
Let me ask you this now. So your dad and mom are no longer witnesses, but they're raising you as a non-witness. Based on what you know about witnesses, what do you think your life would have been like if you would have been raised as a witness?
Oh, I'd probably it's just I've thought about it before, and it's just a bit sad, but I think I'd probably, not that this is sad, but in the sense it wouldn't have been what I wanted, but I would already be married for definite, and I'd just end up being very I think I'd be married, and I'd probably be working in a cleaning job that I'd hate, because as Dad said, they gave me cleaning jobs that I could earn money for, and I didn't want to do that as a kid, and I definitely don't want to do it. Now it's just not my jam. So, but I'd probably be doing that so that I could pioneer, because me and Dad are very alike, and I think I would have ended up living a very similar situation, I think, in terms of doing what I could to make sure everyone was happy and pleased. Also, our family is fairly considered spiritual, a lot of our relatives are known, so there would be pressure, I guess, to perform if we were still in, and to be being that family that is spiritual. And I think performing a certain role of womanhood that I just don't want. I have one day I do want to be married and do all those things, but I want to do it when I want to do it, and not when I'm, obliged to because of some biblical reasonings, and I don't want to have to make cake for my husband to go talk about man things, elders meetings. I'm an equal partner in my relationship, and that's how it should be. But if I was a witness, that wouldn't be. And those are the things. That's why I guess why I get quite passionate about and to ask a lot of our guests about the situation of women in the witnesses, because that really annoys me. And I think we need to talk about it, because I don't think people on the outside of the witnesses realize that is the case, because it's not like you advertise it.
That's true. What is can you give me the flip side of what your life is like now?
Yeah, so now I went to uni, so I wouldn't have been able to go to uni, or it wouldn't have been encouraged. And I went to it is considered the most left-wing uni in all of England, so it was a good time. But it definitely isn't a witness-friendly place. There is no way they would like it. It's very political. It's very it's uni. It's an explorative place. It's incredibly LGBT inclusive, which is great, but they wouldn't like any of that, So I had a great time doing that. I discovered that I love media. I still love to write. I do a lot of that. Things that I wouldn't have time to do if I was a witness, because you're so busy all the time doing witness things, like being creative, doing podcasts. We make films sometimes. I have my partner that I've been with for 8 years, because we've been together since we were young. If we'd been together since we were young and I was a witness, we definitely would have to be married by now. People would be concerned about if we weren't. So yeah, I'm just, have a flat with friends that I live with at the moment. Just, feeling very free to do what I want to do and not controlled by anybody, which is, making mistakes as I go, and that's fine. And I'm not going to get shunned for anything that I do. So that's kind of where I am now.
So you're saying, now you said that you were going to this is the school you went to, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, because it's a little bit different here. So did you get your bachelor's degree, or how did you take
Yeah. Okay. So went to school in sixth form, did all of my so our A levels are like SATs, I do believe. So did those, and then went to Goldsmiths Uni and did media and English. Like college, and did that there for 3 years and got my BA. So Bachelor of Arts in Media and English.
Congratulations.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
So are you the person that decided to do this podcast? I'm assuming that you guys got into the podcasting during the pandemic, and you're having a lot of fun with this, right?
Definitely.
So who's the person that does all the work behind the scenes for your podcast?
Dad does all of that. He's I'm not going to take any credit for that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you guys do? I mean, in the podcast, what are your episodes surrounding?
Yeah, so we kind of have we do 2 podcasts a week. So we do one that's me and Dad, where we talk about a particular topic. So we pick something to deep dive and explore. Some of them are heavy and some of them are quite light, and just to bring a bit of niceness and happiness. And then others, we dive into like psychology of particular elements of cults and things. And then we do our interviews every Sunday as well, where we have different people like yourselves, and every week someone different with their story. But I don't know if there's any particular episodes, Dad, you want to shout out.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really interesting to listen to people's stories, and I think we're kind of building up a bank, for want of a better word, of really interesting stories that people are telling us about their experiences. I guess like everybody does, if you guys do the same. But I think that's quite that in itself is a useful resource for people to listen to. How other people have done it and their experiences. So that's always nice. I think the other thing that I'm really excited about is that we get to talk to some, experts in cults and high control groups and so on. So people like Dr. Alexandra Stein, who's quite a well-known writer and author and researcher, academic into this area. Janja Lalich, who worked with Margaret Singer on her one of her seminal works, really, Cults in Our Midst. So we get to talk to some of these people that are very knowledgeable about cults and high control groups. So I'm really proud of the fact that, within a few months, we've been able to have some guests like that, which is great. I mean, we talk about the dangers and risks of how social media divides people, and I think there are lots of things to worry about. But it's also allowed people like Celine and me and you guys as well to be able to be really creative and produce something, interview people. 20 years ago, you'd have to be a big corporation to be able to do these things. And it's just brilliant that we can, on a computer, you can do the editing. I've learned a whole new set of skills over the last couple of years, doing things that I never thought I'd be able to do. So, yeah, it's been really great listening to people's stories and interviewing interesting people. We're absolutely loving it. We're coming up for our first birthday, at which we must have a birthday party of some sort for the podcast. Yeah.
So, what would your parting words for our audience be, based on your activism, your life story, or what would you like people to take away just from this conversation?
Shall I go first? Or
you go. Yeah, you go.
Okay. Well, for me, I think I suppose the thing that I am most interested in and most passionate about is that people have opportunity to make sense of their lives after they leave a group like Jehovah's Witnesses. Not just Jehovah's Witnesses, there are others out there like that. You find yourself in a situation where you're thrust into a world that you don't really understand very well, and that can be hard. But I think the more you talk to people, the more who've been through that, the more you realize that the human spirit is, is indomitable. People can overcome all sorts of things. And so, there is happiness. There is a chance to be happy after you leave this sort of organization. And I feel now it's taken me a few years to understand myself and what's happened to me, but I feel happy now. And so for others that are in that situation, I do feel that there is happiness there. We can find happiness in our existence, in our life. For me, as I mentioned, I'm a humanist, so that doesn't involve God for me. I don't need to worship a God. I'm happy as a human being, trying to do the best I can, and enjoying the world, enjoying the wonderful things that the world has to offer. Yes, there's some bad stuff there too, but the world is a wonderful thing. Life is a wonderful thing, and we have a chance to enjoy it. So I suppose they're my parting words, from this discussion. And it's great that we've managed to get out of such a suffocating organization.
Oh yeah. I suppose from my end, it's just kind of like completely understand. It's really scary at the start, and just so big. But everyone we talk to every single time has said it's so worth it, and that they have found happiness and freedom in them, and just exploring the world in a way they never thought they'd get to. So and also there's so many people here for you now. Like we're doing this podcast and we talk to people a lot online as well. And there's just this whole community of people that you can see and know that it works out, and that, you can, it will be okay. Basically, I guess just a bit of reassurance. It will be okay.
I think that the statement that you made, Stephen, really kind of puts everything into a nice little nutshell. Mm-hmm. And that is the questions. That's one of the reasons why we have, as part of our little slogan, that I'd rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. Mm. And so that lets us know that there will be questions that you just won't get an answer to. Mm. And for me and for my wife, we're okay with that. We're okay that we won't get an answer to every single question that we have. Mm. And that, I think, is one of the most important lessons that we have learned since leaving this organization. This organization was always about trying to give us an answer to everything. And that's why witnesses became so dependent on this organization. And when people see that you are just that dependent, they'll start giving you answers. Mm-hmm. And many times the answers are just absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we have questions on many issues, but, there's not always an answer. And it's good to be able to not always feel you have to. I feel good knowing I don't have to have an answer. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I have learned, my wife has learned, and we tell other people, learn this lesson. Don't ever let someone tell you that you cannot question the answer they give you, because that's what got us in trouble. Mm-hmm. That's why we're in the situation that we're in now. We refuse to question the answers that we were given by this organization.
Right. So now, do you guys want to tell everyone how they can listen to your podcast?
Yeah, definitely. So the podcast is called What Should I Think About ? Question mark. So and in that ... is where you can insert anything you like. So what should I think about psychology? What should I think about politics? So we get a bit more fine-grained than that, but we that's really the point of the podcast. It's what should I think about this subject or that subject? But we don't give you an answer, I suppose. We're not here to do replace the JWs. So really what we're doing is we're saying, here's some interesting subjects to think about, and we'll think about them together out loud. Is basically what we're doing, and then it's up to the listener what they what they think about it afterwards. That's entirely their choice. So we have fun while we're doing it. So that's the idea. And you can listen to the podcast on all good podcast apps and lots of bad ones as well. So all the Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all of them, I think. That there may be one or two we've missed, but I've tried to capture all of them. So, yeah, we don't do it on YouTube, so it's a pure podcast. You've got a rare view of our faces today. We normally hide behind. Just being an audio version of the podcast, but be great to have you as listeners. So check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And we really appreciate you taking time to talk about your stories and helping our audience to appreciate that there is life after Watchtower and
absolutely
that you are still good people, even though you're not at the Kingdom Hall.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think
so. So this has been Lady C.
And this has been JT.
And we'll see you all on the next episode.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.